Hey everybody, this is Marty the Party, and I just decided to start kind of go going beyond just sort of talking about code and stuff in my channel. And the only reason is I'm not really happy about it because I don't think it's good for me on a professional basis or on a personal basis to sort of share my feelings and thoughts about things. But I do, after basically the whole thing with TikTok getting shut down yesterday and all that and getting brought back up, I realized, like use it or lose it. If you don't use your if you don't use your right to have free speech in the United States, you will lose your right to have free speech in the United States. So, and then like one of my absolute favorite shows today, January 20th, 2025, because things do change. But one of my absolute favorite shows is the Pat McAfee show, and I mostly watch it on YouTube. I would say 9 out of 10 hours that I spend watching sort of streaming. No, I would say 5 out of 10 hours that I spend watching streaming. It's Netflix, and then 4 out of 10 would be or 3 out of 10 would probably be TikTok, and then 1.5 out of 10 would be Rumble, and then a half out of 10 would be YouTube. So I do watch YouTube, and when I do watch, and that's pretty much how I watch the Pat McAfee show. One of the things he often says is be the player you can afford to be. And what he's saying is that, like, if you are this number one draft choice player and you've got a 5 year contract and it's a bunch of money up front and all that, and the coach tells you to do something that's really, really stupid, you can be like, no, that's not for me. But if you're the last bottom guy on the practice squad, yeah, you do whatever they tell you to do. You got to be the player you can afford to be. And I guess I'm at that age and that situation in my life where I can sort of talk more freely and be a little bit more like saying stuff that will likely be used to prevent me from obtaining employment or for whatever, or like maybe even make it to where my YouTube videos, instead of being watched by two people, get watched by zero people. I guess they may take my two people away that watch my shows. But anyways, but the point is that someone you have to use your freedom of speech, or you will lose your freedom of speech. Now, like I said yesterday in some of my videos, the freedom of speech does not mean that you can just say whatever you want. And there's a lot more. Like, you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to break into someone's house and hold them down and hold a gun to their head and make them listen to me," and then go and say, "No, that was okay because I have freedom of speech." Like, we all know that's absolutely not allowed. But at the same time, you're not allowed. You are allowed to kind of sit by yourself in your room and mutter and say whatever you feel like saying. And then most everything falls in between those two. Like, where you're sitting around, nobody can hear anything you're saying, you're just all by yourself saying stuff, where you are absolutely allowed to say whatever you want in the United States. You can say whatever you want. I don't care who you're bad mouthing, I don't care what you're saying. You are allowed to do that, to the full extreme of like just busting into somebody's house and forcing them to listen to you at gunpoint, right? Like, most things fall between those things. And like, I know that, like, at weddings they say, um, if anyone objects to this marriage, please speak now or forever hold your peace. And I think there probably was a time when people used to actually use that to speak, but now no one ever says anything. And it would be incredibly inappropriate to say anything at a wedding like that today, because the social norms are just totally against that. So the point is, but that so that's the point. The point is that, like, if we all quit talking and saying what we think about things, especially because we're very likely wrong, right? Like, you're wrong most of the time. Like, for every right answer, there's an infinite number of wrong answers. So it's very unlikely you're going to be right most of the time. Um, So like in order to get to that right answer, you have to go. A lot of times you have to go through a lot of wrong answers, and then people, yeah, you're like if you're trying to get a good job and then somebody else is trying to get a good job and they can find a video of you saying something that was just straight up wrong in one of these videos, they could probably use that against you and somebody else can get that job, and it's just like one of the like freedom. When I was a kid, they would always say freedom ain't free, and it was basically saying, yeah, if you're free to carry a gun, you may get shot. That's the price of freedom. Freedom is the fact that other people are free as well. So, that's just like that was sort of one of the common things that people always said when I was a kid. So, I will say this. I so for this video, and like this whole sort of stream um, playlist is all going to be completely and absolutely a complete response to the shutdown of TikTok yesterday. Um, but I did want to start with this kind of thing of when I was a child, and that's what I said to ChatGPT. I was a child in the '70s, and I always heard people say "ain't" a word because ain't in the dictionary. And then I remember it appearing in the dictionary in the early '80s. So I was kind of trying to put that whole thing together, and basically, yeah. So ain't had been around since like the late 1700s, and then basically it kind of was like stayed in our lexicon, our words that we used all the way through, and then in the early '80s, it started to show up in the actual dictionary as a word. Um, and all the Merriam-Webster in the early 1980s, Merriam-Webster and other major dictionaries started to include that. So I was kind of relieved when I read that because it was like, okay, so my memory of what was happening in the 70s and early 80s is not completely flawed. That actually did happen because I do have memories of the 70s and 80s that I'm pretty sure never happened. But this is not one of them. But my point is that, oh, and then okay, so now I'm gonna say one more thing before I get to my point. Um, in the early or a few years ago, I was like, so as a computer programmer, basically, I think computer programmer is a very, very broad statement. Like someone's a computer programmer, but and there's a different kinds, and I'm the kind of computer programmer that like I come in and then I make programs for computers. That's what I do, and I think that in a lot of ways that's kind of like an air conditioning repairman, right? Like someone comes in and then they repair your air conditioning. And so it's hard for me to like maintain employment over a long period of time because what really happens most of the time is there's like a lot of okay. When I worked for Boeing, we worked on software for an airplane, a specific airplane, a C-130U model gunship, and we only wrote code. And a whole year, we had one build a year, and we only wrote code for 1 week of the year. And so the 25 weeks before that, and 25 weeks after that, the 25 weeks before that was all analysis and stuff like that, like writing all kinds of documentation, basically doing design documents and all kinds of stuff. And then the 25 weeks after that was all testing. So you actually only coded for 1 week a year. Um, and the rest of it was all just getting prepared to code or testing the code and making sure it was art. Now, there was code written before because, being prepared, part of the design document was actually getting stuff working and all that. So the code was written and good. So it's not to say that there wasn't any work at all for software development, but the vast majority of that development all happened in that 1 week. And there were actually some developers that sort of would go from different platform to different platforms, and they would only work like that 3 or 4 weeks right there, and then they would move on and they would go someplace else. Um, and that is, I think, how software really works, like software development. So you don't. So when some company comes in and they build some big software thing, the actual hardcore development only happens for a small percentage of the actual time that the software is being built and all that. And once it's completely built, the maintenance isn't, usually anywhere near as much. So I've had a hard time like keeping contiguous employment. I've worked lots and I've worked on tons of great projects and I got some huge wins under my belt, but just I'm not always necessarily needed all the time. So at one point I worked at Uber, and while I was working at driving people in Uber, which I think was a great job for me because that we went from like that was during the time where everything kind of shifted over from being mostly about computers to being mostly about mobile, and that actually gave me a chance to actually use and become deeply involved in a mobile app, the Uber app, picking people up and seeing how that all worked and all that. So that was really good for me. But during that time, I would have a lot of downtime, so I would read these books on this subject that I was really interested in called linguistics, and in that they sort of formalized this concept of ain't a word because ain't the dictionary with these two ideas. One is that there's two kinds of linguistics, and there's actually thousands of kinds of linguistics, but this person, this in this book, broke linguistics into two categories, and one category was prescriptive, and one was descriptive, and one was saying there's some linguistics that tells you how it's supposed to work, and then there's some linguistics that describes how it actually works. So ain't was a word in the concept of descriptive. Like there are people use the word ain't, but prescriptive ain't wasn't a word. And all of that, the whole point of all of that is to say that like we quite often don't understand what we're dealing with. And not all industries are always ready or are always in a position to understand what's happening. And the TikTok ban was just a perfect example of where you can look at things from a legal perspective, like from if you were trained in law and to dissect and understand things from the way that people in the law understand and break things down and be completely off, completely 180 degrees away from the reality. And because the reality is the whole point to all these laws and stuff is to create a safe and good place for humans to operate in. Because without the law, if we didn't have any law, like if we didn't have stop signs, we wouldn't have like you wouldn't be able to drive so many cars because we wouldn't have like a system in place. So we need laws that say if you run a stop sign, you're going to get a ticket. You know, we have these laws in place that are just supposed to make the world better and make things run better. And the people with legal understandings of things, they looked at social like these social networks and they did not understand it at all. They didn't have the vaguest idea. Um, and like when it happened, I was just like, it was so obvious to me as a computer programmer that there was no way that that could hold. And I didn't know exactly why. It was just kind of like one of those things where it's like, I don't know, like if you went to, like when I grew up in New Mexico and we were in the desert and somebody was just like, oh, I'm going to take a canteen of water and I'm going to go walk to the top of that mountain. And we all understood that, like, yeah, the top of that mountain is only like 20 miles from here. So, yeah, it is feasible that you can walk 20 miles, but you could spend your entire life trying to figure out how to walk to the top of that mountain in a day and never discover it. Like, the treacherousness and the way the conditions just made it impossible. That was kind of like when they said they're going to shut down TikTok, I was just kind of like, if someone said, well, you tell me, explain to me why I can't walk to that top of the mountain. Can't necessarily give them the exact reason why they are going to die if they attempt to walk to the top of that mountain and they don't give up at the right. Like, we're going to have to send someone up to rescue you, basically. And I can't tell you the exact reason why we're going to have to send someone up to rescue you, but it's a fact that we're going to have to, Or like if someone would like could logically explain why they've never skied in their life before and now they're going to go down a Black Diamond Trail. Like I don't even know what a Black Diamond Trail is, but I'm assuming that if you try to go down one and you've never skied before, that if you manage to stay on your skis, you're probably going to have a really really bad outcome, And I don't know why. And I would imagine maybe someone who's ridden 1,000 back could get explain it to you, but like maybe not. Maybe they just be like, yeah, I don't know. You might make this, you might make that, but something's gonna get you along the way. That was kind of how this was. It was like you can't just like take something like a social network like TikTok that is totally ingrained in people's lives and rip it out of 150 million, 180 million, whatever the number was, Americans, and not have like severe consequences that come back. And I can't even begin to explain like what they could be. Like it could be like your 12-year-old may just lose their mind on you. Your I, maybe like a very very important person was watching a wedding on TikTok live, being live when it got shut down. Maybe like I just can't even. Maybe an important surgery was being done. Like there's just no telling what kind of things when you pull something like that out, what the consequences were. And the fact of the matter is my understanding is like they shut it down, and like 3 hours later they were desperately trying to get it back up again. So if that's the case, that means probably like 10 minutes after they shut it down, the phone calls to get that thing back up again were already starting to happen because it is tough to get technical people, especially when they've had to do something like that to then come back and undo it. Um, so I don't know. So I thought that, and so then I had a conversation with my son who is an attorney, and he was just like, no, it is totally, there's nothing unconstitutional about banning TikTok. Nothing. And I was like, there absolutely is. It is absolutely unconstitutional to ban TikTok. And he's just like, no, it's absolutely not. Like, you're shutting down a platform. And yes, it has been established that not only is right to talk a fundamental right, but the right to listen is a fundamental. It's part of that. Those are together. And you can go listen, like they can still communicate with you through whatever. And I was just like, no, because like I don't know why, but like when his mom tries to sell tumblers on Facebook, no one buys them. She can't get in front of anybody. When she tries to get her tumblers in front of people on YouTube, nothing. It's a dead end. When she try anything else, TikTok is the only one that works, and I don't know why it works, but that's like saying that if I went into a room and I could talk and people would listen to me, and then there's another room but I can't talk. Like when I go in there, they put tape on my mouth and I can't talk anymore. That since I can still go in the other room, I'm allowed to. My speech hasn't been infringed on. It's like that's insane because one of the rooms lets me communicate and one of the rooms does not let me communicate. And I don't know why, like there is no physical tape. I don't know why my ability to talk on YouTube is not as good as my ability to talk on TikTok, but it isn't. And I don't know. There's no telling why. There just isn't. And it's like, so his legal background made him I don't think, very well suited for understanding the actual mechanism of communication. But my technical background made me better understanding of that. And then, and I think most of the people making the rules are from a legal background, which absolutely makes sense. It's just like most people writing from a code or from a technical coding background. But his ability to actually communicate, I mean, to understand the actual issues was sort of hindered by his background. And we see that in coding all the time, right? Like I worked at this hotel place and we were all convinced. They have this thing called A/B testing where like literally I think we had at on that website we got like 6 million people a day um, to go to make reservations. Like it was 6 million people a day because it was like it was a bunch of hotels and stuff. And so like 6 million people a day were making reservations. So they put 3 million of them to one view and 3 million to another view. And one view kind of gave you all the breakdown of all your, like what your risks, like if you spent this much money, then you can cancel. And if you spend this much money, then you can cancel the day of. And if so, and you have insurance, and it had like a full, clear understanding of everything. And the other one was just like the original, like where you don't really understand. It's just, hey, this is the price, and you can buy it. And we were all 100% convinced that the sales would go way up if people understood what they were buying. And like the marketing people and all the other people were like, no, you guys are out of your minds. And we were like, I'm more likely to buy. And I think the average technical person is a lot more likely to buy if they understand everything. But the sales were way down on the one that explained everything. Now, the actual sale price, the average sale price was up, but the overall sales were down dramatically. It's because us developers and technical people, we didn't understand the problem. We didn't understand what was going on. We didn't understand that like people get overwhelmed and then they just bail. They're just like, yeah, I don't understand all this. I give up. We didn't understand that, but the marketing people did understand that. And they were like, yeah, just give people a simple thing that they can just buy or not buy. If you give them all these details, they're going to get confused and then they're just not going. Now, the 1-800 number went way up. Their sales went way up when we did that. Um, but, anyways, yeah, so yeah, that was a debacle. It was an absolute debacle. It is weird that the legal people of the legal cast, I guess is what you would call it, the folks of legal persuasion misunderstood this so badly. Um, I know that like the Congressman Rand Paul, he said as an act of civil disobedience, he created a his first TikTok account. And the thing is Rand Paul is a medical doctor. He's not a legal person. Um, yeah, there's something where because like I don't know, I just cannot fathom how the Supreme Court came down 9-0, that just saying that because of the one immutable fact, the fact that TikTok was owned by China, that one immutable fact, something that they cannot control, is where they were born, makes it okay to shut their platform down. Like, and then to not let me talk. That was bizarre. That was really, really bizarre. But anyways, just to sum up everything, yeah, this is, I don't know. I could be completely wrong on all this stuff. I really genuinely don't know. I don't really like the idea of spending time. I don't plan to upload a video like this every day. Just maybe once in a while, just so that like the algorithm, if like I don't really know how YouTube, this is going to be on YouTube, and I don't really know how YouTube decides who they're going to show what. I'm 100% confident that if I put this exact video on TikTok, it would be probably 500, 300 to 500 people would see it, but that on YouTube, like maybe nobody, or maybe 3 or 4 people will see it. And I don't know if that's like some big conspiracy, or if it's just the way they're set up, or what the deal is. And I don't even think it matters. But the point is that it's important to talk and to say things. And if you don't talk when you can talk, like if you're here like on an H-1B and you don't want to lose your job, and you think that there's a possibility that like let's say you work in a big company, and like when you work in a big company, the problem is that 1,000 people can get you fired, and like literally nobody can save your job if one of those 1,000 people want to get you fired. So if you put out a video like this in one of those big companies, and you're like an H-1B, so that means if you get fired, you're not going to be able to just go hop into another job or try to find another job, and you can't just drive an Uber or do DoorDash or something to try to get by for a little while. You're going to get deported. Yeah, you probably should not do something like this, because this may very well have a really bad outcome for you. But if you're in your late 50s and you're not really worried about getting, like, I don't want to get fired from my job, but like if I did get fired, it's not the end of the world. Um, you know, if you're kind of like you can talk and it's not going to be the end of the world for you if the wrong person sees it, you probably should talk. It's unfortunate, but use it or lose it. Anyways, see y'all later. Hang in there, everybody. Bye.